Greetings again everyone. Now, one of the most exciting lenses to be released in the 2010s was the Sigma 18-35mm f1.8 Art, a zoom lens for APS-C digital SLR cameras. It combined a revolutionarily bright maximum aperture with very good image quality to make it one of the few camera lenses I was personally so impressed with that I actually bought one for myself. It paired up incredibly well with the also new Canon 70D camera with its early face detection autofocus system to be an amazing combination for video work, and the lens has become so legendary now that for the past few years people have been crying out for an update for mirrorless camera systems. Cut to 2025, 12 years later, and 2 weeks ago, I'm sitting by my front door like an excited puppy dog, waiting for the DPD guy to come and hand me this, a package with a copy of the new Sigma 17-40mm f1.8 DC Art. Sweet. Sigma have clearly put some time and effort into this update. It's obviously got a better zoom range than the original 18-35mm lens. It's a little bit smaller, but at 535 grams or a bit over a pound, it's an impressive 30% lighter, making this thing quite a bit more enjoyable to actually carry around with you and use. It features more weather sealing and more controls on its body, and most importantly of all, it should be even sharper than the original lens, which admittedly did struggle a little when zoomed into 35mm. The lens's UK price will be £779 or $919 US, and that's potentially very reasonable for everything you're getting here. It'll be available on L mount, Sony E mount, Fujifilm X mount, and wait for it, Canon RF mount. I'm sure Canon shooters will be especially delighted by that news, although as I mentioned already, it is an APS-C camera lens, not full frame. Here's the coverage you will get on a full frame image sensor. As you can see, at 18mm, we're definitely getting a cropped image circle. Zoom into 40mm for more coverage, but still, this lens really is only for APS-C cameras, so if you're on full frame, you'll definitely need to shoot in your camera's lower resolution cropped mode. I'd like to thank Sigma UK for loaning me one of these lenses for a couple of weeks for evaluation, although as usual, this is a totally independent review, and I'm going to be talking about its strengths and weaknesses, no matter how excited about this thing I might happen to be. The lens's zoom range of 17-40mm is a really nice little improvement of the older 18-35 and brings this lens into a proper standard zoom kind of range. It's the full frame equivalent of about 26-60mm, or on a Canon APS-C camera 27-64mm, because Canon just have to be different. Still, that's a decently wide angle, zooming into short telephoto, where you can just about get away with some portrait photography. Especially when shooting at f1.8, that maximum aperture can get you some pretty out of focus backgrounds, even at wider angles, especially when you're getting a bit closer to your subject. And this lens also happens to have a very close minimum focus distance. f1.8 is obviously also useful for getting faster shutter speeds, making the lens easier to use indoors or in other darker conditions. This is a lens that will give your APS-C camera a bit of a full frame feel. Something I should mention is that this lens does not feature its own optical image stabilization. It did work perfectly with my own camera's in-body image stabilization, but if your own camera doesn't have that feature, then your video footage will look more shaky, and you'll sometimes need to use higher ISO levels when shooting indoors or in darker conditions for images free from movement blur. The lens's build quality is really nice here. Despite being much lighter in weight than the 18-35mm original, it still feels perfectly solid and tightly assembled with a combination of metal and heavy-duty plastic parts. The lens is advertised as being dust and splash resistant, and there is indeed a weather sealing gasket around the metallic rear mount. As I mentioned, another improvement of this new lens is its aperture ring. This can be set to turn with clicks at every f-stop, which I personally prefer for stills photography, or to run smoothly, which can be helpful for video work. Another switch on the side allows you to lock that aperture ring in or out of its A, or camera controlled mode, which is another feature I really appreciate. On the Canon RF version of the lens, this will be a smoothly turning control ring instead, customizable to different functions in your camera. In front of that comes the lens's rubberized zoom ring, which turns fantastically smoothly and evenly, one of the smoothest turning that I've ever handled, and as you have probably noticed by now, the lens zooms internally, which is another nice touch. In front of that, we get an auto manual focus switch and a couple of focus hold buttons, and finally, in front of that, we get the lens's rubberized manual focus ring, which also turns extremely smoothly, and it works very responsively with the lens's focus motor. When you're zoomed out, the lens only produces a small amount of focus breathing. Zoom in, and that breathing is suppressed, which is very impressive. Combined with that smooth turning aperture ring, this could be a great lens for video work. The lens's autofocus motor is also quite something. It focuses silently and accurately, and whether you're in single shot autofocus mode or in continuous autofocus mode, it's lightning fast too. Nice! The lens's front filter size is 67mm, and it also comes with a lockable lens hood with a high quality rubber trim to its bottom edge. As I already mentioned, it does not have its own image stabilization. Overall, it's 10 out of 10 for build quality, as the lens features everything you could possibly hope for. Its excellent autofocus, low focus breathing, and aperture ring all make it a great option for video work as well, if your camera features stabilization of course. Alright, let's take a look at image quality then. I'll be testing it today on a Sony a7C camera in its 26 megapixel APS-C crop mode. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At 17mm and f1.8, the lens is razor sharp in the middle with excellent contrast. Corner image quality is just a little softer, but still very impressive. Stop down to f2.8 for more sharpness and brightness in those corners, which now look great. The lens stays this sharp down to f8. If you stop down to f11 or darker, you'll get a gradually softening image due to diffraction. Still a very good start at 17mm. Let's zoom in about halfway to 28mm. In the middle of the image at f1.8, picture quality is still fantastic, although this time, for perfect sharpness, you should stop down to f2 or f2.8. Well, let's open back up to f1.8 and take a look in those image corners. Okay, nice. They look even better than they did at 17mm, being brilliantly sharp straight from f1.8. As before though, stop down to f2.8 for just a touch of extra resolution and a bit more brightness. Finally, let's zoom all the way into 40mm. At f1.8, picture quality is still looking great here, and that's where the lens most improves upon its 18-35mm ancestor. Stop it down to f2.8 to get a small extra boost and see basically perfect sharpness and contrast now. Let's open back up to f1.8 and look over into the image corners. Like at 17mm, they are a little softer than the middle, but they're still looking very good. f2.8 and f4 look about the same, but at f5.6 there's just a very marginal improvement. As before, the lens stays this sharp down to about f11. Alright, well, considering the lens's extra bright aperture and quite decent zoom range, this is an excellent performance. The lens is very sharp from corner to corner with good contrast at all aperture settings and focal lengths. At the wide and telephoto ends of the zoom range, there's a small benefit to be had in stopping down a little, but overall, it's just a brilliant performance, almost like you're getting 3 or 4 prime lenses in one here. Okay, let's turn off in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting. At 17mm, we get pretty strong barrel distortion, and vignetting is pretty noticeable in the corners at f1.8. Stop down to f2.8, f4 or f5.6 for those corners to gradually brighten up. Zoom into 23mm and that distortion quickly straightens out. Zoom into 40mm and we get strong pin cushion distortion now, and vignetting at f1.8 is really quite serious, but if you stop down to f2.8, those corners brighten up pretty quickly. Still, it's a poor performance for distortion and vignetting here. Leave those in-camera corrections turned on and make sure your raw images are getting corrected. A really cool feature of this lens is that it can focus remarkably closely to your subject, whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out. Now that is fun. When you're zoomed out, close-up image quality remains excellent even at f1.8, and that counts between the 17 to 20mm range. However, if you zoom in beyond 20mm, close-up image quality spectacularly falls apart. Here's a close-up image at 40mm and f1.8, and now f2.8. and at f4. It's only really at f5.6 and f8 that close-up image quality gets really sharp when you're zoomed in. So, if you want to take close-up pictures, either stop the lens down a bunch or zoom out at least to 20mm or wider. Let's see how well the lens works against bright light. It's a decent enough performance here. At 17mm, we do see some gentle flaring and a couple of large bright rings emerging, but they are fairly transparent and I didn't notice them much when shooting in the field. If you zoom in, then some glaring is apparent when bright lights are right in the image frame, but we don't see anything else, so that's a fairly good show. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look for coma and sunstars. At 17mm, if we look right into the edges, some mild coma smearing is noticeable here. Stop down to f2.8 and anything that was there is now gone. Let's zoom out then and look for sunstars. They are beginning to emerge at f5.6. Stop down to f8, f11 or f16 for them to get gradually stronger until they're really quite big. Nice. Next, Bokeh. I'd say this lens's out of focus backgrounds just look averagely smooth. They're not the softest I've ever seen, but at the same time, there's nothing especially ugly or distracting going on to take away from your image. Something I will say though is that, when zoomed into 40mm, a cat's eye shape to Bokeh balls seems a little stronger than usual, and there's just a tiny hint of outlining to those brighter specular highlights. Finally, related to Bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. I had a feeling we might encounter a problem here, and I was right. At f1.8, when you're zoomed in, colourful fringing on Bokeh highlights is very strong. Here's f2.8 and f4, it's still around at f5.6 and even f8. At f11, it's finally pretty much gone. Here's my overall conclusion though. The Sigma 17-40mm f1.8 may not quite be a perfect lens, but still it's a pretty amazing one, and I think most people watching this video with APS-C cameras should consider dropping everything they're doing right now and going out and buying one. I'm kind of serious. Sure, it has some hidden problems with vignetting and distortion, and a real weakness when shooting close up when you're zoomed in, but everything else about the lens is absolutely brilliant, from its exciting maximum aperture to its improved zoom range, its great sharpness and contrast, its perfect build quality and relatively light weight, and its useful features for video work. There is a related broader question of whether you should stick with your APS-C camera and get a camera lens like this to go with it, or upgrade to a full frame camera and get a 24 or 28 to 70mm f2.8 lens. That'll give you similarly out of focus backgrounds and similar zoom range. Well, actually you'll get a slightly better zoom range with the full frame option, but this is just a lens review, let's keep things simple. The only ingredient really missing here is image stabilization, but at the lens's quite reasonable price point, you can't have it all, and most new cameras are coming out with in-body stabilization anyway, so the lens easily comes, highly recommended. Thanks for watching everyone, and a special thanks to all my Patreon supporters and channel members who help to keep these reviews coming sponsorship free. Check it out in the description below. Supporters also get access to all kinds of exclusive bonus content and early access to some of my reviews. Ciao!